Good evening. This is something of a first, a change to the schedule requested by one Radio 4 listener. In the search for a commanding commentary on the random shootings that blight the USA, Leo Chapman wrote to Radio 4 to ask for just one edition of Letter from America. It seems to offer remarkable resonance to the Sandy Hook school killings in Connecticut. In his weekly programme, the longest running of its kind, Alistair Cooke offered a quality control check of history alongside American current affairs. In what follows, we hear that the terms of America's gun control debate have changed remarkably little over the past few decades. President Obama is calling for concrete proposals, most likely to include a ban on military-style assault weapons and on high-capacity magazines. But we have been here before. Such a ban was enacted in the 90s on the back of public concern over a rash of shootings, especially in schools and colleges. Between 1946 and 2004, Alistair Cooke covered attempted and actual assassinations of presidents and a long line of horrific shootings in America that shocked the world. He took the nation's temperature on gun control again as Congress was about to pass the Brady Act after more than a decade of lobbying by Jim Brady, President Reagan's former press secretary, shot with the president in an assassination attempt. Here in this archive edition, first broadcast 19 years ago on the 29th of October 1993, Cooke sets out the issues.
With all this talk about guns, there is now a likelihood that at long last the Congress will pass the so-called Brady Bill, the first federal attempt to control guns. Mr. Brady was President Reagan's press secretary when, in the spring of 1981, pistol shots from a demented young man wounded the president and 3 others. Mr. Brady suffered brain damage and has been paralyzed ever since. But ever since also, he and his wife have labored against the opposition of 6 Congresses to fashion a gun control bill. It is a very modest proposal, in the main requiring people wanting to buy a gun to wait 5 days till their past has been looked into. People for and against gun control have pointed out for years that anyone intending to commit a murder, or even to possess a weapon as an intimidating cover for a burglary, is the last sort of person who is going to wait 5 days or even to put in an application. I think that once such a bill is passed, or even one much more stringent, there's a good chance of a repeat performance of the social calamity that followed on the passage of the Prohibition Amendment to the Constitution. That was ratified in 1919 and became law 1 year later. It was called at the time the Noble Experiment, though pretty soon it became painfully clear it did not endow Americans with more nobility than they already had. People who'd never drunk were tempted to try the forbidden fruit, and to the amazement and then the despair of the general population, a whole underground industry arrived to bottle and provide the fruit. It spawned, of course, the whole savage and squalid era of the bootleggers, the emergence of rival warlords. Petty crooks turned into millionaires from their remarkable initiative in developing a far-flung transport system, recruiting armies of agents, bribing police, and on the side making an even more profitable living from squeezing regular protection money from small shopkeepers, laundries, groceries, in exchange for protecting them from the protectors' own guns and arsonists. At the moment, there's been surprisingly little speculation by people who are for gun control about the methods of evading a new law likely to be devised by the types who shoot each other down. For the most part, random murder in this country is performed by street gangs run amok, and whatever the law, they will certainly know where to get guns and surely their new sources of supply will mushroom. Most crimes in the home, 85% of all shootings, are done by one member of the family or a relative against another. I should have reminded you that most states, I think 38, have their own form of gun control laws, but I noticed that the governors do not make a habit of boasting that the laws have made a striking difference in the number or frequency of homicides. The disparity in numbers follows, rather disappointingly, the difference you might expect. Large population, many shootings. Small population, Wyoming, Vermont, few. This brawl over gun control, it's rarely achieved the civility of a debate, has been going on for 30 years, ever since the assassination of President Kennedy. And throughout that time, two forces have accidentally combined to defeat any national gun control bill. First is the almost holy power over popular opinion of the Second Amendment to the Constitution. It consists of one clause, one sentence, to wit, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The National Rifle Association is the second defeating force, and it has that sentence chiseled, or used to, over the entrance to its national headquarters. Or wait a moment, not the whole sentence, not the whole reason for allowing the people to keep and bear arms, just the right of the people. Now that amendment was written at a time when the new nation, the United States, had no standing army, and it was the intention of the Founding Fathers to see that it never had one, because standing armies were either the private possession of monarchs, or they could be commandeered by upstart dictators. You simply had to look to Europe and to the country they'd broken away from to see the universal truth of this. So they naively thought the country could be made safe by a militia on call, by allowing every man, whatever his trade, farmer, mechanic, parson, lawyer, butcher, baker, to keep by his fireside a rifle. When there was an uprising, a secessionist move, an Indian raid, a tax revolt, whatever, the militia would be called. And when it was all over, the man went back to his trade, and the gun went back by the fireplace. So the Constitution says because the security of a free state needs a militia, then you should be able to keep and bear arms. Of course, this beautiful system couldn't last long, especially against warlike threats from abroad. Today, need I tell you, the United States has a standing Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. Voluntary to be sure, but recruited, permanently organized, paid, and uniformed. The one condition the Founding Fathers set to allow the keeping of guns is no longer there. Nevertheless, not only the National Rifle Association, but the great majority of the American people defend your right and mine to possess guns because it's there in Holy Writ. The right to bear and keep arms shall not be infringed. I do believe that an overwhelming majority of Americans, both educated and illiterate, simply do not know that the Constitution does not proclaim any right to have a gun, to protect your family, to shoot an intruder, even to shoot a deer or a rabbit. The condition that allowed private ownership of guns is either ignored, forgotten, or by most people not known about. I've called the National Rifle Association the second force, always mobilized to resist any form, local, state, national, of gun control.